The first point is we're going to establish when the judgment of God begins. God has told us that. And we are also going to establish the fact that Jesus Christ is the Messiah of the world. You know, friends, there's many in our world today that are waiting for the Messiah to still come. But the book of Daniel, chapter 8 and chapter 9, tells us clearly that Jesus Christ could be, the Messiah could be no other than Jesus Christ himself. There is no other Messiah to come. Jesus Christ is the Messiah, and friends, we'll soon find out why I say that. Now, we have been studying the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation quite a lot through this series of meetings, and we find now in Daniel chapter 8 that Daniel has a vision. Daniel chapter 2 we've studied, Daniel chapter 7 we've studied. Now in Daniel chapter 8, Daniel has another vision. In this vision, he sees a ram. This ram has two horns. One horn is higher than the other. And as he's watching this ram, it's pushing westward and southward and northward. And as he's watching the ram, he sees out of nowhere comes a he-goat. This he-goat comes across the face of the earth so fast, it doesn't even touch the ground. It comes against the ram, it attacks the ram, and it kills the ram. Daniel said the he-goat that he saw had a great big notable horn between its eyes. And as he was watching the he-goat kill the ram, it killed the ram, and after he watched that take place, he saw that the great notable horn was broken off. As this horn was broken off, as he was watching in vision, he noticed 4 other horns come up in its place. And then from those 4 horns, from one of those horns, comes a little horn that grows exceeding strong and powerful. And the vision finishes with these words in Daniel chapter 8, looking at verse 14. This is the last words of the vision. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, friends, we've learnt already something about the cleansing of the sanctuary, haven't we? It's something to do with the great day of judgment. And of course, Daniel hears those words. He hears the words, under 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, of course, Daniel was thinking to himself when this finished, the same as you and I are probably thinking to ourselves, well, what does this mean? Obviously, this vision has something to do with the cleansing of the sanctuary and the day of judgment. But what does it all mean? What was taking place in Daniel's vision? We find as we go on now from verse 14 that Daniel hears a voice that comes from heaven. And it calls out to a person or an angel called Gabriel. Gabriel, we understand from the scriptures, is probably the highest angel in heaven. And notice now what verse 16 says as Daniel looks at this, as he continues hearing after this vision. Daniel 8 verse 16. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So here we find this voice comes out, and the voice is a call to Gabriel. And Gabriel is one of the highest angels. He said, Gabriel, make Daniel understand the vision. So Gabriel now begins to help Daniel understand this vision. And in our next verse, verse 17, we find out our first clue to what this vision was all about. Daniel 8 verse 17 says, So he came near where I stood. And when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Here we see Gabriel says to Daniel. Daniel was fearful because it was an angel. And he says to Daniel, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. In other words, this vision isn't just a local thing that's going to happen in the next couple of years. This goes to the end of time. This is a long period in this vision. Now, of course, we have to ask ourselves the question, what was the vision really all about? The first thing we have to try and identify is these 2 beasts, the ram and the he-goat. Now, in previous lectures, we've had to go to some lengths to try and work out what this Bible imagery is all about. But we find here it's a very, very easy one to work out because Gabriel, the angel, just tells us who they are. Now, of course, we know in Bible prophecy that a beast is a kingdom, nation, or a ruling power of some sort. But we find here in verse 20 and 21 that Gabriel just tells us who they are. He says to Daniel, "The ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king." These are 2 of the same world powers we've seen in the past, Medo-Persia and Greece. It's very interesting here because the ram, which was Medo-Persia, had 2 horns. One was higher and larger than the other. Remember back in Daniel chapter 7, there was a bear raised up on one side. It was Medo-Persia as well. It was a coalition dual empire. The Persians were the strongest. That's why it's called usually the Persian Empire. But we find here also this he-goat with this notable horn. And the Bible says the he-goat is Greece, and the notable horn is the first king. Now, of course, we know the first king of Greece, the one that brought it to power, was the great man of Alexander the Great. And it's interesting because as Daniel saw this vision, he saw the great horn was broken off, and 4 other horns came up in its place. And we learned in our previous lectures as well that those 4 other horns were the 4 generals of Alexander that took control of the empire after he died, sadly, at a very early age. Now, Gabriel goes on here. He just keeps explaining to Daniel the whole vision. He says it very, very clearly. It's Greece. It's Medo-Persia, first king, more kings, horns. He explains the whole vision to Daniel as clear as crystal. And he gets to the end of his explanation, looking at verse 26 and verse 27, and he now gets into the 2,300 days. Notice Daniel 8, verse 26. "And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore, shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days." Verse 27, "And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I arose up, and did the king's business. And I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it." Notice Daniel chapter 9, verse 21. It reads as follows, "Yea, whiles I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation." So Daniel's praying, and all of a sudden, who turns up? Gabriel turns up, who he saw in the vision at the beginning. What vision was that, friends? The vision of the ram and the he-goat in the 2,300 days. Verse 22 goes on and says this, "And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding." Verse 23, "At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision." He says to Daniel, understand the matter, consider the vision. What vision is he talking about, friends? He's talking about the vision of Daniel chapter 8. Isn't that right? The reason being why he's come back is because he didn't get time to explain to Daniel the 2,300-day prophecy and the issues surrounding that, and now he's come back to give him that extra information. Gabriel explains about the 2,300 years and the cleansing of the sanctuary. That was the last thing that he said to him before he fainted. So now keep in mind that we are talking really about the 2,300-day prophecy, but Gabriel now breaks it down into segments because there's more important information for Daniel and friends, for you and I to understand right now tonight of what this time period is all about. Now notice the very next words of Gabriel. We've got to really be putting our thinking caps on now. We're going to go into some timelines and some time periods. I'm going to try and go as slow as I can so we can all get this into our minds and understand the clarity and the power of this prophecy. Daniel 9 verse 24. Now Gabriel goes straight into giving some more information about the vision. Daniel 9 verse 24, the Bible reads, Gabriel speaking. He says to Daniel, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. The first thing that Daniel was told now, he says, Daniel, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and thy holy city. Now that word determined in the Hebrew is chathak. It means to cut off. 70 weeks are determined or cut off or allotted for thy people. They've been cut off from what? From the 2,300 days, or as we know in Bible prophecy, 2,300 years. He says to Daniel, Daniel, your people have got 70 weeks. They're cut off for your people and for your holy city. Now we have to ask ourselves here, well, how long is 70 weeks? What is Gabriel trying to get at here? If we look at 70 weeks and we calculate that together, if we look at 70 weeks and we go 7 days in a week, so 70 by 7 days in a week, it gives us 490 days. Now, of course, we know in Bible prophecy that a day represents a year, so we're really talking about 490 years. Gabriel said to Daniel, your people, the Jewish nation, you've got 70 weeks or 490 years allotted to you and your sanctuary and your city. Now, 490 years were given to the Jews, but what for? Why was Gabriel saying this? You see, while Gabriel speaking to Daniel, the city of God, Jerusalem, and the sanctuary has been annihilated. They're captives in Babylon. Daniel's been praying about going back and getting his people back to Jerusalem to build the sanctuary and to have freedom for their worship once again. And now Gabriel says, Daniel, your people have got 490 years. You've got 490 years basically as a second chance to get yourselves right. Because of your apostasy, because of your rebellion against God as a nation, you are in captivity. God will bring you out of captivity. He'll give you a second probation, a second chance of 490 years. Now, of course, when it comes to any time prophecy, you have to have a starting point. Okay, the Jewish nation was going to be given 490 years, but when would it start? When would the 2,300 years start? Well, friends, we don't have to wait very long to try and find this out, because now Gabriel tells Daniel the starting point for this prophecy. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 25, we find here that Gabriel now goes on in the very next verse. In verse 24, he said, Daniel, 70 weeks, 490 years is for your people. And he gives us now in the next verse, verse 25, he gives us the starting point. Notice verse 25 now. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. Daniel was just told by Gabriel, the starting point for all this, Daniel, is this. When the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem goes forward, when this takes place, this is the beginning of the 490 years. Now the question, of course, is, well, when did the decree go forward to rebuild Jerusalem and the sanctuary? The decree to rebuild Jerusalem was given in the year 457 BC. This is one of those undisputable historical facts. In the year 457 BC, Artaxerxes of the Medo-Persian Empire, the king of the Medo-Persians, made that decree to restore and to build Jerusalem. Yeah, the book of Ezra in chapter 7, verses 8 to 11, it tells us that he issued this decree in the 7th year of his reign. And it's an undisputable fact that he began his reign in 464 BC. So if you minus, because we're going BC here, if you minus 7 from 464 BC, it brings you to the year 457 BC. And this is our beginning point for the 2,300 years and also the 490 years. But notice now what the rest of verse 25 has to say. Let's go back to verse 25, Daniel 9 verse 25, and let's read the entire verse again and find out another important point. Daniel 9 verse 25, the Bible says, Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, which is 457 BC, this is the part we read just before, so from 457 BC, notice the rest of the verse now. Unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, the angel Gabriel's making us think a little bit here, because he breaks down now the 70-week prophecy. He says, from the going of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, 457 BC, unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. Now, how long is that? If we have a look at this, we find that 7 weeks, of course, is 7 weeks. 60 weeks, a score is 20. So 3/20 is 60 and 2 weeks. So we have 7, 60 and 2. It's 69 weeks. So Gabriel's telling us